We want to give some sense of solidarity and provide safety
So we're back to the same population.
Have got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. These racist teachers have got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho.
Fuck you, George. You don't want to hear a goddamn thing you have to say. You talk so fucking much. No, you shut the fuck up.
These white-ass faculty members need to be holding him and all these people accountable. We don't need to be doing all things.
All white people benefit from racism, regardless of intentions. No one chose to be socialized into racism, so no one is quote-unquote bad, but no one is neutral. To not act against racism is to support racism. Racism must be continually identified, analyzed, and challenged. No one is ever done.
One of my goals is to have diversity, equity, race be a part of everything. It's not what you do at 10 o'clock on the agenda and then you move on to something else.
Right, and that's the call. You're not giving up or going away. You're just trying to figure out how to diplomatically keep them in, and keeping them in is an interruption to what they really want to have happen.
I encourage you to look them up as well. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Their actions were initially to throw a heavy weight and a bottle at cops. So I offer 3 very different strategies. Right? One is political organizing. Another one is non-traditional, maybe, more resistance, more violent kind of action, and also prayer. 3 different political strategies.
Don't think this is some distant memory of far, far long ago, okay?
It's about us as faculty and staff. But you know what? It's also not about you.
Denny graduated from Evergreen in 1973 and later served with us on the Board of Trustees during difficult periods in which the college faced the major financial challenges I mentioned. And as my fellow trustees will attest, Denny's... Okay. Don't be unpolite. This isn't your time.
It's not yours either.
Okay, so this is a message from a student. Here's their statement. My name is Carl Gonzalez. I am in Standing Rock. I am a grainer. Fuck your neoliberal bullshit to make this school run like a corporation. Fuck raising tuition, catering to racists, homophobes, transphobic, bigots, neo-Nazis, rapists. Fuck you.
If this building has my name, where students will walk through it to be educated, to have seminars, to argue, to resolve conflicts, that will make all the difference in my heart with my name on this building, because that is what it should do. And that is what it's designed to do, and it's wonderful that we have an environment where that can happen. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all my friends and staff, and thank you to the students. Thank you.
Welcome to the Quillette Podcast. I'm Jonathan Kay. In keeping with the very serious and intellectual nature of this podcast, I will start things off this week by quoting at some length from an august academic article entitled The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct, published in 2017 by the peer-reviewed journal Cogent Social Sciences. Here's the abstract to that article. Anatomical penises may exist, but as preoperative transgendered women also have anatomical penises, the penis vis-a-vis maleness is an incoherent construct. We argue the conceptual penis is better understood not as an anatomical organ, but as a social construct isomorphic to performative toxic masculinity. Through detailed post-constructuralist discursive criticism and the example of climate change, this paper will challenge the prevailing and damaging social trope that penises are best understood as the male sexual organ and reassign it a more fitting role as a type of masculine performance. End quote. Now, if you think that maybe what I just read sounds like a lot of absurd gibberish, well, you're right. The article was published by credulous editors, but the authors had actually submitted it as a hoax, one of a number of similarly nonsensical hoax articles that comprised the so-called Grievance Studies affair of 2018. Other articles written by hoaxsters Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, and Helen Pluckrose included Going In Through the Back Door, Challenging Straight Male Homohysteria and Transphobia Through Receptive Penetrative Sex Toy Use, and Stars, Planets, and Gender, a framework for a feminist astronomy. As anti-woke performance art, the Grievance Studies hoax, which some referred to as so-called squared, was a brilliant and effective send-up of the often vapid and ideologically programmed nature of identity-based academic fields.
I just read my email. We have our first win. The dog park paper has been accepted. They don't know. We're about to tell them.
Gotta read you something. Dear Dr. Helen Wilson, I have now closely considered the revisions of your manuscript, Dog Park, and will recommend its publication in Gender, Place, and Culture. You have done very good work to address the issues reviewers raise and have clarified your arguments. Thank you for your contribution to Gender, Place, and Culture, and I hope to be seeing your manuscript in print. Yours truly, PhD, Managing Editor, Gender, Place, and Culture. We have an accepted paper in the #1 feminist geography journal.
Since approximately June of 2017, I, along with two other concerned academics, Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose, have been writing intentionally broken academic papers and submitting them to highly respected journals in fields that study gender, race, sexuality, and similar topics. We did this to expose a political corruption that's taken hold of the university. By this point, several of these papers have been accepted in highly respected journals, and one that claims that dog humping incidents can be taken as evidence of rape culture has been officially honored as excellent scholarship. I'm not going to lie to you, we had a lot of fun with this project.
The reviewers are worried that we didn't respect the dog's privacy. That's the concern. We respected the genitals.
But don't let that lead you to believe that we're not addressing a serious problem. If you have a few minutes, I'll try to explain. To be clear up front, we think studying topics like gender, race, and sexuality is worthwhile, and getting it right is extremely important. The problem is how these topics are being studied right now. A culture has developed in which only certain conclusions are allowed, like those that make whiteness and masculinity problematic. The fields we're concerned about put social grievances ahead of objective truth. So as a simple summary, we call the problem grievance studies. To test the depth of this problem, my collaborators and I dedicated ourselves to a 1 to 2 year secret project targeting top grievance studies journals with an agreement to publicly release our findings, no matter what the outcome. We started officially on August 16, 2017, and by Thanksgiving we were in trouble. We had begun ambitiously and mostly stupidly. Our first papers were really only suited to test the hypothesis that we could penetrate their leading journals with poorly researched hoax papers. That wasn't the case, and we were wrong for thinking we might be able to. So by late November, it looked like all we'd accomplish is ruining our reputations.
If this doesn't achieve anything, it would actually frighten me.
We needed to change our approach, so we walked back from the hoaxing and began to engage with the existing scholarship in these fields more deeply. This led us to learn a lot more about the inner workings of grievance studies.
The best I can tap into is that there's this kind of like religious architecture in their mind where privilege is sin, privilege is evil, and they've identified education as the place where it has to be fixed. So you can come up with these really nasty arguments like, well, let's put white kids in chains on the floor at school as an educational opportunity. And if you frame it in terms of overcoming privilege, and then you frame their resistance, that they won't want this to happen to them, that they would complain about this. If you frame that in terms of, oh, they only complain about that because they're privileged and they can't handle it because their privilege made them weak, then it's right in.
Papers started getting in.
You've got to be me that this happened.
By March, with 2 papers accepted and 1 published, it would be fair to say that we had become accepted grievance scholars. By June, it was 3, with 1 having been officially honored by the journal as excellent scholarship. By July, it was 5. By August, 7. This shouldn't have been possible. So far, what we're learning is rather astonishing, but the data we've gathered require more analysis to fully comprehend. What appears beyond dispute is that making absurd and horrible ideas sufficiently politically fashionable can get them validated at the highest levels of academic grievance studies.
We rewrote a section of Mein Kampf as intersectional feminism, and this journal has accepted it. Social work.
This is deeply concerning, because the work of grievance scholars goes on to be taught in classes, to design educational curricula, to be taken up by activists, to influence how media is produced, and to misinform journalists and politicians about the true nature of our cultural realities. No one tolerates this sort of corruption when they find out an industry is funding biased research to make itself look a certain way. The same scrutiny should apply to research when it pushes a political agenda. And we have uncovered enough evidence to suggest that this corruption is pervasive among many disciplines, including women's and gender studies, feminist studies, race studies, sexuality studies, fat studies, queer studies, cultural studies, and sociology. Those fake papers that Peter and Helen
Let's
and I
tell
wrote.
everybody what those are, just because it's an amazing source of enjoyment and entertainment for folks that are looking for something to read.
Right. So we don't lose the point real quick. We did in less than 10 months the almost equivalent of a whole academic career in this stuff, and we're amateurs.
And
so
you did
it's
it
easy.
as a joke,
As
and
a
it got
joke.
passed off as real, and then actually applauded.
That's right. So we wrote 20 fake academic papers in these exact fields: critical race theory,
So we should
gender
tell
studies.
Peter Boghossian did it with you,
Yeah.
and
Helen Pluckrose.
is Pluckrose.
Yeah, Pluckrose.
Pluckrose.
Second most English name
and she
ever.
wrote Cynical Theories with you.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's a very English name.
It is a very English name. So we wrote these papers to try to show that this scholarship is bogus.
Right.
And so we spent just under a year writing crazy stuff.
Please tell people the dog park one.
You love them. So
My
the
favorite.
dog park paper was actually, I think, kind of the masterpiece of the thing. So we wrote this paper where we claimed that we were a feminist researcher who spent 1,000 hours in Portland, Oregon dog parks over the course of 1 year. Never in the heavy rain. We put that in the paper, never in the heavy rain, like that's some relevant detail or something. So 1,000 hours over a year is already ridiculous. That's like 6 hours a day, every day.
That's so much time.
I know. And what we said she did was she watched these dog fights and dog rapes and all this stuff, and we put this crazy stuff in there, like sometimes they try to break up a dog fight by doing jumping jacks by the dog or singing songs. It's just ridiculous. And the dogs were pooping on each other. We put that in the paper. And then we said when there was a dog humping, that she would go up and she would inspect the dog's genitals, and she inspected 10,000 dogs' genitals and then interrogated the owners about their sexual orientations. And what she wanted to find out was if straight men would discourage gay dog humping versus straight dog humping, and it was different for women and gay men. And then we said we're going to pass that data through black feminist criminology, which makes no sense. And then we said that the conclusion was that dog parks are petri dishes of canine rape culture, and that they are rape condoning spaces just like human nightclubs. So human nightclubs are automatically now rape condoning spaces. And so the conclusion was that we now have to train men the way that we train dogs.
And by making firm and repeated stands against rape culture in society, activism in media, human males may be metaphorically shocked out of regarding sexual violence, sexual harassment, and rape culture as normative, which may decrease rape rates and disrupt rape culture and emancipate rape condoning spaces. It is also not politically feasible to leash men, yank their leashes when they misbehave, or strike men with leashes or other objects in an attempt to help them desist from sexual aggression and other predatory behaviors.
It's not politically feasible.
It's not politically feasible. Of course, the following caveat applies. Because of my own situatedness as a human rather than as a dog.
And they asked you to do that.
I know.
They asked you to specify that. I am not a dog.
Yeah, this is a revision. This was a requested revision in terms of reviewer 3, who asked us to say, while I don't object to this use of rape to describe instances of sexual assault in non-human animals, I think its framing needs more careful work. To start, a more robust definition and explanation of rape in the context of dogs is needed. How did the author ascertain whether the sexual advances of a dog were wanted or unwanted by the other dog involved?
This strikes me as likely to open considerable misinterpretation by human onlookers. The author fairly unequivocally tags a number of 1 every hour of sexual encounters between dogs as rape without providing a strong basis for the researcher's knowledge of whether these encounters were wanted or unwanted. The author defines consensual dog sex as when the penetration was not resisted. But what are the author's credentials for assessing dog behavior to this extent? For example, does the author have training in animal behavior that would enable these assessments? The real themes of material semiotic proof. Do you know what that means? Dude, my guy even eat you, man.
I can tell you, man, it was the craziest thing ever. I remember I got the email.
Subject is GPC query, and the first few words, Dear Helen, I have a question for you about your article.
Because I just saw the editor and I'm like, oh no, they figured it out, right?
As you may know, GPC is in its 25th year of publication, and as part of honoring that occasion, GPC is going to publish 12 lead pieces over the 12 issues of 2018 and some even into 2019. We would like to publish your piece, Human Reactions to Rape Culture and Queer Performativity at Urban Dog Parks in Portland, Oregon, in the 7th issue. It draws attention to so many themes from past scholarship.
And they give this an award. And so it's like the bullshit level is just insane.
What was the award?
So they had a thing. It was their anniversary. The journal is the #1 feminist geography journal in the world.
I still don't really know what feminist geography is for sure.
And wait a second, you don't know what feminist geography is, but we're about to get a paper published in the top feminist geography.
I kind of know what it is. I'm not going to say I don't know what it is at all. I don't think I can make it 5 minutes with an actual feminist geographer before I was exposed as a complete
even though you're published in the top journal.
In the top journal.
And there was their 25th anniversary edition.
What's the name of the journal?
Gender, Place, and Culture. And it's the leading feminist geography journal in the world, and they had their 25th year, so they're on their 25th anniversary, and so what they wanted to do was highlight one paper per issue the entire year as being exemplary scholarship in feminist geography, and ours was chosen. And so I grabbed, because we're making a documentary about it, right? So we got a filmmaker, Mike Nana, he's the one that did that 3-part documentary of Evergreen that showed everybody that's where everybody's Evergreen now. And so Mike, it was like, anything that happens, film it. So I grabbed my GoPro and I have this footage and it's like sideways.
But I'm trying to process the fact that we seem to have just got some kind of an honor or major recognition for the dog park paper, which is our first acceptance and one of the most ridiculous things that will be in print.
It's almost like the world slid off of its foundation a little bit when they gave that paper an award for me. It was just so weird.
OMFG, and then Helen replied OMG, 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 and I said holy shit, and Helen put surprise face, happy face, champagne emoji, and I put holy absolute fuck. And then what this shows, in a sense, with the Gender, Place, and Culture Journal, they don't just think that paper's okay. They think it's exemplary for the field. I don't know what to do with that. I mean, the thing is insane. It's so stupid.
Now, what was the response to you guys getting an award for that once you revealed that this was all horseshit?
Oh, she wasn't happy. The editor of that journal was not happy. She felt like betrayed, like, Well,
she was.
She was. But she felt, like I had been so nice. I was so kind to her, and she was very kind to me. She was a very nice person. Most of these people, that's very important, but these are mostly nice people. There are some hustlers, and they take advantage of that situation. Yeah. Because that's what this is really wide open to, is hustlers.
She was a nice person, but she's living in that world, and she thought that all that stuff made sense.
Yeah. That's the thing, is they think this stuff's all real. Like, yeah. It's like they've kind of gone into this mass delusion where everything's power dynamics, and the power dynamics define how everybody experiences life. And
well, you nailed it.
We did.
You really nailed it. You came so close to reality, but yet still lived in the world of parody.
That's right.
But you said all the things that you need. It just shows that there's such a high tolerance for bullshit.
That's right.
In those air quotes disciplines.
Right. And those air quotes disciplines are now being like mainlined into like every university, every school, every corporate boardroom.
How did that happen?
I mean, we were talking about, the raising the frequency thing when these events happen, but mostly it's that they took over our colleges of education about 1980, and so they've been slowly turning teachers to the project. And then in 2002 and 3, there were a couple Supreme Court cases that were talking about affirmative action. And they said that if you want to do affirmative action, you can do it if it increases diversity and equity and inclusion. So they started to build these offices in the university. And those university offices started to dictate what you could and couldn't say. You could get in trouble or brought up to hearings. Even if the hearing finds you innocent, you still had to waste your time going through this humiliating hearing.
You may be thinking that the work done in these fields must be good, because it seems to continue the noble work of the civil rights movement. Well, after having spent a year immersed in it and becoming recognized as experts in it, we have to disagree. Grievance Studies does not continue the work of the civil rights movements. It corrupts it, and it trades upon their good names to keep pushing a kind of social snake oil onto a public that keeps getting sicker. Progress is easier without Grievance Studies. My collaborators and I are left-wing academics who can now say with confidence, these people don't speak for us. This is now a plea to all the progressives and minority groups these people claim to speak for. We suggest you spend some time critically engaging with the ideas coming out of these fields and decide for yourself whether they speak for you.
But the hoax also got a lot of people mad, precisely for this reason. Here, for instance, is Deborah Poff, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Academic Ethics, being interviewed by the CBC's Anna Maria Tremonti in 2018.
Should there be repercussions? Is this any kind of something that gets punished?
There's only one person that's actually, I think, has an academic appointment in this group.
That's right. He's at Portland State University.
I would think there's a number of violations of basic integrity in publishing that should be investigated by a disciplinary committee at his university, because this kind of gotcha research. It uses so much energy of people with goodwill who care about publication ethics and integrity, and they are manipulating the process to show that it's fallible.
Now, as Poff notes in that CBC clip, of the trio of Grievance Studies hoaxsters, philosophy professor Peter Boghossian was always the most vulnerable to academics' ire. And in the last few years, critics have done everything in their power to discredit Boghossian's work, portray him as a bigot, impugn his ethics, and denounce him to his bosses at Portland State University. Numerous investigations were conducted by the university, including some based on outlandish accusations. At one point, rumors were even circulated to the effect that he beat up his family members. Last week, in a surprising twist, it was Boghossian who pulled the plug on the relationship. He quit the university so that he could work full-time on a new NGO he started up for disaffected liberals who, like him, oppose what he describes as the intellectual corruption that afflicts modern universities. In his widely circulated public letter of resignation, Boghossian wrote that students at universities such as Portland State are, quote, not being taught to think. Rather, they are being trained to mimic the moral certainty of ideologues, end quote. Peter Boghossian spoke to me last week from his home in Portland about his decision to quit and his new post-academic life. So last time we talked, you were in your backyard because it's construction crew in your house.
Still in my backyard. I'm still walking around my backyard.
But so what's happened since then? I guess everything's been awesome, right?
It's a funny definition of awesome. I guess if you stretch the semantic range of awesome to be kind of fucked up, then the answer is yeah. Are we recording now?
I decided I'd start with a joke because that's my thing.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, that's good. That's good. Well, I just resigned from Portland State. Believe me when I tell you, it was after an unbelievable amount of thought and consideration and talking to friends and family about it. And there was just no question that it was the right thing to do. I really haven't felt freer in a long, long, long time.
So I think for a lot of people who've been following your case, and I think a lot of academic cases, the narrative is the academic is on tiptoes because they don't want to be fired. And this kind of feels a little bit like man bites dog because you just said, you know what, forget it. You threw the mop in the bucket, which is kind of what Bari Weiss did at the New York Times. And maybe it's fitting that you told your story on her site. Is that kind of how it felt, the way I'm describing it?
Well, I just want to go back to something you said before. It's not that some of them may fear that they're going to be fired, but it's more that they fear the relentless campaign of investigation, harassment, lack of collegiality.
So one of the things I've heard from profs is that the students are actually more tolerant than the administrators because the administrators are so risk averse and they fear getting complaints from the students. Is that the case that you experienced?
Students is an umbrella term, and there are different types of students and different students who are more susceptible to the moral orthodoxy than others. It's a complicated problem. Does it come from on high? Yes. Does it come from colleagues? Yes. Are these people true believers? I think so, but that's harder to say in many cases because there's a culture of fear. Most people, they just want to know. They just want to engage ideas. They just want to figure things out. But are there people in the class who will complain about literally anything and go straight to the dean, just right to the provost's board of trustees or what have you? Yeah, there are. And instead of saying this is a place of higher learning, there's capitulation, there's safetyism, there's words as violence, there's construing, talking about other ideas as denigrating a protected class. And so there's a suite of values at play, from economic considerations of the university to I think Bari Weiss, you mentioned Bari Weiss in her letter of resignation, mentioned jury by Twitter. There are just so many factors that collude to creating censorious and illiberal environments.
Yeah, I had been at home because I received some violent threats from coworkers.
From your coworkers?
Yeah.
There's cross-cultural evidence of women's interests being on average different from men's interests. There's no evidence that mean intelligence is different between men and women, although there is evidence that men have higher variability, which means we're going to find more really smart men and more really stupid men than we are going to find really smart women and really stupid women. Not to say that we haven't all met some really smart women and really stupid women, right? But that there are going to be higher numbers, higher variability, but the same mean with regard to intelligence, but with regard to interests, the means are different, right? And this is exactly what you write, right? The interests themselves are different. And the scientist in me wants to say the truth will set you free. We cannot change what may be true at a societal level unless we understand why things are true.
Why would we want to force someone to do something they don't want to do anyway? That doesn't make any sense to me.
It maintains sexism, really, because if we are assuming that the choices that men make are the ultimate, absolute best choices, we are making men the default humans. The only reason women aren't doing exactly what men are doing in exactly the same way is because they're doing something wrong or they're being conditioned into not thinking the right way, because really they should be just like men. But in fact, the areas that women dominate, healthcare, education, psychology, publishing, these are all hugely influential areas on society. They are important.
Let's look at differences between men and women that are explicitly anatomical and physiological. Are men taller than women on average? Does anyone take offense at that fact? Are you irritated? So I would say you could be irritated by it. You could be irritated by the fact that women have to be the ones to gestate and lactate. You could be irritated by a lot of truths. But taking offense is a response that is rejection of reality. So men and women are different on height, they're different on muscle mass, they're different on where fat is deposited on our bodies, right? Our brains are also different. So there are some binaries.
Cowards! Security! They shut off the volume. Can you hear? Can everybody hear?
All right, well, we're going to raise our voices. The conversation's going to go on.
Okay, even the women in there have been brainwashed.
I have a really good patch on my jacket. No, you want to film my patches on your jacket.
Whereabouts in the patches? Just not touch his book.
Oh no, I haven't touched anybody. Yeah, we gotta give her space.
There's not much I can do about it.
Oh gosh, you touched me.
The thing that strikes me about speaking to you is that there are rules to this game that we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, the term usually used to describe postmodernism is a cultural logic. It is a new cultural logic which goes against the modern ideas that we had before. It is unrepentantly irrational. It doesn't make a pretense to be reasoned, and it doesn't make any pretense to be evidence-based. It can look like inconsistency, it can just look like hypocrisy, irrationalism, it can look hateful, and you really need to understand that this is the inevitable consequence of seeing society as constructed in language into hierarchical systems of power.
What's that?
So you can get your black diversity on camera now. We can get a real whole group. I even got Abe Lincoln for you. So
You're too close. I can't actually get you with this lens if you want to be in.
that's really unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. They very obviously don't want to
gonna show up
tell
on
me about your
Breitbart or
thoughts.
whatever, I guess
Tell me
that's
about
fine.
your thoughts.
My thoughts?
Yeah, on the event. Why did you do what you did?
So, if I were to tell you any thoughts about this event, it would be more than this event is worth, honestly. Like, you can't...
But you've come here. You've come here.
You can't argue against, like, what is a fact.
Not a lot of people maybe know the details of your Title IX investigation. You know that expression, when did you stop beating your wife? That's kind of what the investigation was. This went beyond ideological. Like, there was actually some crazy accusation that you were beating family members.
Yeah, I mean, people would walk up to me and ask me that. And Laura Kipnis has written about this. I think the thing that's important to understand here is that there's no due process in these investigations. So you don't have direct access to what the claims were. You're inferring them from the questions of the Title IX investigator, and quite frankly, from people walking up to you on the street saying, what is this I hear about you beating your wife and children? And in my case, my daughter is adopted from China, and that's a particularly hurtful and potentially, I mean, it's just an outrageous claim, and there's just nothing I could do about it. Like, there was just literally nothing I could do about it. And it was just investigation after, and I was just, one of the final straws was that they just launched another investigation about me, I don't know, a month and a half ago. It was just this nonstop series of investigations. Just, I don't even know how much time they took. I don't know how much money. But I think one of the things that's important to know is that these are offices in search of tasks. If they find somebody who is challenging or questioning, but not just challenging or questioning about anything, challenging or questioning about certain things, right? Then they just weaponize the offices of diversity, equity, and inclusion against them. Either the fear of being called in, or the theft of time, or just the pain in the ass, frankly. You have a climate and you've created a culture that's inimical to free thought and open expression.
There's so many people who use all this rhetoric about, oh, it's a totalitarian system and it's fascistic, but the elements of totalitarianism and fascism are, there's one central authority pushing an agenda on everybody else. What you're describing, and I've heard other people in universities talk about this, is it's more amorphous than that. It is this bloated bureaucracy.
I think that's right. The problem is that the university is not well, and our students are not being served. And something almost nobody talks about is the people paying tuition are not being served because they think that their education that their child is receiving is similar to the education they received. And the universities have transformed so dramatically in the last few years, it's just not true. So we're doing a disservice to an entire generation of students. The conversation can go many places from here, what to do about it, what's the disservice, etc. But what's really at stake, and it would behoove us to talk about, is that I think that there's too much emphasis that's placed upon free speech. Free speech is a proxy for something else. And what that something else is cognitive liberty. And we have entire wings of university architecture that are dedicated to, it's like a catechism. So the institution, the university it's not a symposium in the Greek sense, where people go and they discuss ideas. It's more like a church where people go to a catechism and they look at the university as an indoctrination mill. What they're indoctrinating people into is a certain suite of beliefs and ideologies broadly around what Helen Pluckrose calls critical social justice. And in that, there are right answers to moral questions. They know those, and if you don't, in the letter I wrote, mimic the moral certainty of ideologues, right? If you don't parrot those back, then you get graded down, there's a problem, etc. I have a good friend of mine, by the way, who's a young guy. He's in medical school at Oregon Health Science University, and I was about to tweet this when you called. They asked people to voluntarily segregate into racial groups.
Affinity groups, they sometimes call them.
Let's see, what was the word they use?
And by the way, the white group is often called the white accountability group.
Wow. Yes, racial affinity groups is what they called it. I'm looking at the picture of the text right here. And so our institutions are damaged. There's a crisis of legitimacy in them. We have really ideologues who have jobs for life, who are pushing certain moral orthodoxies and testing people on papers that are untethered to reality. They've taken over the institutions. They've hired people like them. Just for example, the National Association of Scholars released a report that 99% of all, and I can send you the link so you can fact check it after the call, 99% of all donations were to one particular party. Now you can guess what that party is. It's irrelevant.
From academics. You're saying 99% of donations from academics.
No, from Portland State University.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can guess the party, but the point is that is a monoculture. I'm an atheist. I'm a very out atheist, and I'm an outspoken atheist. But I don't believe the arguments for the existence of God. I teach them, but I don't believe them. That's why I have Christian apologists come in. That's why I had Corey Miller from Ratio Christi come in and give students his best arguments for the existence of God. And I taught students beforehand how to act respectfully and how to ask really difficult questions while respecting the person. I had Phil Vischer from Veggietales come in. I've had local apologists come in to the class to speak because that's what students need. That's Mills, one of Mills' dictums, right? They need to learn from people who believe it. But we're not getting that in the university. Those monocultures, Cass Sunstein has done some great work on this. They contribute to a kind of a grotesque ideological conformity.
Oh, by the way, I love that you just assume that our international audience knows what Veggietales is. So I'm just going to fill them in that Veggietales is this cartoon in which anthropomorphic vegetables go on adventures. And if you watch enough of them, you realize that there's these Christian undercurrents. I want to go back to what you said about free speech, though. Despite all you've endured, you've had free speech.
What we're talking about is in the classroom, right? There's a difference between what you can say in the classroom. So, for example, I was told in no uncertain terms to not render my opinion about protected classes or teach in such a way that my opinion could be known. And when that did come up in the classroom, instead of explaining different sides of the case. You remember Lindsay Shepard?
Of course, yeah.
I think it's a similar case. You're talking about having conversations with people in the classroom where even giving another side of the opinion or of a claim or making an argument like this is why really smart people would think that. That's what I'm talking about.
Understand that this is a form of corruption that's
closed doors here.
Yeah, if people don't understand that this is a form of corruption that's political in nature, that's trying to change how we validate ideas. Brett Weinstein called it idea laundering, which is a brilliant term, that you have these prejudices and opinions. Our work shows that you can start with the conclusion and work your way there, so you can conclude nearly anything as long as it's hostile to the right things, privilege in particular. And so then the university, or these grievance studies fields, take them in. They do the peer review thing, obviously in a way that's very concerning from our work, and then they put them out, and now they have this respectability of knowledge when they still are just prejudice and opinion. Critical race theory is a mess, for example. It is an explicitly political situation in which whiteness has to be bad, and therefore it can't ever do anything right. And they take these ideas and launder them through the academic process. And these departments exist specifically to launder these ideas, to put them through the academic process and give them the appearance of being rigorous studies. So then activists can go out and say, oh, a study has shown. These ideas disseminate straight out of the university into culture. They're everywhere. People run into them all the time. Everybody's confused about issues of race and racism and sexism now because they seem to have been redefined. And this whole power structure is becoming the water we swim in. And this whole thing that everybody and everything is racist and sexist would never have been able to take off and get much traction if it weren't being made to look legitimate by a scholarly enterprise that's been pushing it for 5 decades.
I want to heat things up erotically a little bit.
Erotically?
Yeah, because I want to talk about the conceptual penis as a social construct. I'm not just talking filth here. This is a 2017 peer-reviewed paper that you wrote.
Co-wrote.
Co-wrote, right. Am I right that you did get this accepted in a peer-reviewed journal?
Yeah, we got that accepted. That was our first Sokol-style hoax paper. And when I say we, it was with James Lindsay. And by the way, if I never revealed that as a Sokol-style hoax, that gibberish piece of madness, and it's really worth, I think you should put a link so people can read it themselves. Oh, and by the way, the conceptual penis is one of the most cited papers in all of gender studies. But, so it was published in a low-ranked journal, an intentionally deranged paper, and our detractor said, listen, this simply does not do what you think it does, and if you want to prove that there's a problem in certain disciplines, that they're not rigorous and they're ideologically based and not tethered to reality and not based on evidence, you need to do A, B, C, D, E. So I said to my co-author, okay, this is great. They've given us a roadmap. Let's do A, B, C, D, E. And if we're wrong, we'll say it. Sure enough, we wrote 20 papers before we got busted by the Wall Street Journal. We took the lessons from the conceptual penis. But the fact is that there really are disciplines that are ideologically based.
The way I heard about this was there was a woman on CBC here in Canada who just absolutely lost her mind about this, but not because, oh, wow, this shows up how bankrupt these journals are. She was mad that you were discrediting all of these super valuable programs that are doing so much valuable work. To me, it was an illustration of people will forgive you for being wrong, but they'll never forgive you for being right. You showed this up for the scam it was. Was this, because this is 2017, was this the thing they were never going to forgive you for?
Yeah, that's correct. We didn't do it to engineers or physicists or what have you, but it was so striking. We went to a conference in Germany, my co-authors and I. We actually went out for drinks, for beers, beautiful German lagers, and the people around the table were begging us. They were begging us. Let's see if you can do that to us. Please submit it to us. And I was just so struck by that. I was so struck by the difference in attitude. When you're engaged in either a decision-making process or the peer review process or what have you, the closer you are to evidence, the less you need to become offended. If you published a paper in a civil engineering journal, for example, that said bridges should be made of balsa wood and you got it in, you would have a very different reaction. But these are ideological fields. If anybody hasn't read it yet, I would urge you to read Cynical Theories, because that's the Rosetta Stone for this. That explains everything.
That's Helen Pluckrose. That's a great book.
That's correct.
My background is metallurgical engineering. And 5 years ago, I could have sat here cackling, saying, that'll never happen to the sciences. And yet, in Montreal, my hometown, Concordia University is knee-deep in something called decolonizing light, centering indigenous concerns in science. And a big part of that is decolonizing the Western construct of light waves as opposed to indigenous mystical conceptions of light. This stuff is seeping into engineering. I don't think they've built a bridge out of balsa wood yet, but...
Yeah, it's already in. And you also have things like research justice, which is another level of derangement, which means forwarding authors from historically marginalized backgrounds in your citations, research justice and citation justice. I've been screaming about this stuff for years, and it went from, oh my God, that doesn't exist, haha, Boghossian's a crackpot, to, okay, this is just in a fringe discipline with a fringe number of people, to, okay, this is just in fringe disciplines, to, okay, this is in liberal arts, to, okay, this is in the humanities, to, okay, this will never escape to the real world. Okay, so it's out a little bit, but it won't metastasize, to, holy shit, it's f***ing everywhere.
A couple of years ago, I quit a job that I didn't like so much, and I didn't realize how much tension I had built up. And I came home and I spent a week chopping wood and building a treehouse for my then 5-year-old girl, and it was the best week of my life. I know that maybe medically you haven't been feeling so great lately, but is there a treehouse in your future?
That's a good question. No, there is no treehouse in my future. I've started a nonprofit, National Progressive Alliance, and the only thing I want to do is to beat back against this ideology. And I think that there was something very important that I don't want to gloss over in your comment. It's all fun and games until it hits the sciences. It's all fun and games until it hits medicine. It's in medicine. It's all fun and games until it hits the military. Our institutions are being corrupted. There's a crisis of confidence, legitimacy crisis in our institutions. People don't trust their institutions. Look at the vaccinations. I mean, you could just go down the list. ACLU.
Oh, God.
Right. So there's no treehouse. There's no rest for the weary. There's only fighting back. And now that I don't have the albatross of Portland State University around my neck anymore, that's exactly what I plan to do. And I've assembled a fantastic team. And again, it's National Progress Alliance, and we're fighting back.
And that's the call. You're not giving up or going away. You're just trying to figure out how to diplomatically keep them in. And keeping them in is an interruption to what they really want to have happen.
I get into work today, and what do I see? I get into work today, and I see the Portland State University paper is apparently done a hit piece on me. There it is. Professor Boghossian speculates instantaneously. Intersectionality is the latest cult. Humanities under attack by neo-Marxists. I don't think I ever used that. The left is censoring free speech in academia. That's certainly true. Professor Boghossian's expose of postmodernism speculates instantaneously as if this is snake oil. Free speech is under attack by neo-Marxists. Impress your colleagues with edgy criticism. The photoshopped piece, nonetheless. So let's see what we have here. The goal in the contemporary bullying style of Trumpist politics is to ridicule others for personal gain. PSU Educational Collective. PSU Pro-Educational Collective. These people are, look at that, they're anonymous. We have opted to communicate our concern through a collective identity rather than individually. Boghossian has not only indicated his less than collegial attitude with his hoaxes, but has actively targeted faculty to other institutions. Really, where would that be? None of us wish to contend with threats of death and assault from online trolls. I mean, it is utterly incredible to me what the university has become when you have to publish an anonymous hit piece on people. So that's what it is. You can't, they can't defend their ideas. They link me with Trump. They attack me as a person. So this group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know if I counted that right. This group of 10 professors, esteemed professors at Portland State University.
Ah, shit. Helen, do you have headphones?
Do I have headphones?
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Can you please put them in? Because the feedback is killing me.
Oh, okay. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Is that better?
Oh my God, it's a billion times better. Okay, so this esteemed group, this esteemed collective of roughly 10 professors wrote a letter, an attack piece to the Portland State University Vanguard that made the front page.
Well, it's not even just a hit piece. It's a letter addressed to the students of the university where you teach, trying to play the concerned educator. Hey, students, you need to be worried about this professor in our midst. This is way worse than a hit piece.
And then they accuse you of not being collegiate.
His invitation of Google engineer James Damore tells us To tell us why women are incapable of excelling in tech fields was certainly disrespectful of all of his colleagues who identify as women. Damore proved barely articulate, much less a serious gender scholar.
Barely articulate? Are you kidding me? The professors published a statement saying he's barely articulate?
He turned up to something, to a university, was hidden in a back room. There were threats to beat him to death with a brick for saying that men and women's gender differences have different interests on average. And then he managed to speak actually pretty articulately for somebody who is autistic and incredibly nervous in front of audience, including hostile people who damaged the sound equipment before getting a police escort out. But they are the victims here who are in danger, and they're calling him inarticulate and misrepresenting what he said. I am so fucking angry right now.
Well, listen, I mean, they're making it bigger than that too. A couple paragraphs down, these types of fraudulent, time-wasting, anti-intellectual activities are something we are becoming nationally known for under the guise of free speech or academic freedom.
When you talk about wasting people's time, imagine all the people who read these papers and take them seriously. That's a waste of their time.
Talk about wasting somebody's time. They wanted to make a graduate or undergraduate level course in masculinities based on the Hooters paper.
Well, you've just been written up in the Mean Girls burn book. That's what it looks like to me. There's nothing substantial in there. I think that what does this mean for you though? It means that inside PSU there is a pushback and an anti-Pete thing going on, right? It's an anti-you, not...
What I would love to have happen is that some of my colleagues who weren't terrified and who weren't being bullied would write another letter in support of me. But they're too terrified. They'd never do that, because then they'd be targeted and they could go up before the diversity board.
This is pretty savage. This part that's highlighted in red is just ridiculous. At the end it says, worse yet, it jeopardizes the students' reputations as their degrees in the process may become devalued. So somehow you're devaluing, they're telling the students of Portland State that your involvement in this project had something to do with devaluing their educations. Chronic and pathological unscholarly behavior inside an institution of higher education brings negative publicity to the institution itself, as well as to the honest scholars who work there. This is not about grievance studies degrees being devalued. This is Peter has made every degree at Portland State less valuable by trying to do an audit to raise the quality of scholarship coming out of shit fields. Then they go on, make no mistake, we are some of academia's biggest critics. No shit, you problematize everything, but that's not criticism, that's cynicism. You're not really academia's critics, you're trying to turn it into a cult.
What do you do to something like this?
Well, I mean, it's so wrong on so many levels, and it's so cowardly, and no one will debate us, no one will have a conversation with us, no one will, I mean, so that's the question. So what do? Do you ignore it? I was thinking about writing a response back to it, but who am I writing a response to? It's probably the Grand Wizard of the Diversity Board.
This is an inquisitional maneuver is what this is. This is inquisitorial. There's no way around it. They're targeting an individual from behind an anonymous collective, trying to appeal to a bunch of crap that doesn't even make sense. They didn't even do the slightest amount of their homework. Everything, I think, in this article is actually wrong. They got our names wrong. They misrepresented Damore. They said we didn't engage, repeatedly say we didn't engage, and there's all this proof we didn't engage. That's the exact opposite of what we did. We engaged. They call us a clown car of hoax writers that doesn't bother engaging with that.
Yeah, who probably outpublished the whole lot of them in 10 months.
That's probably why they wrote it. We outpublished their entire careers in 10 months.
You know what angers me as a podcaster and editor is that it used to be that when a person, they were about to get canceled or people were trying to cancel them or they self-canceled or they quit like you did, it was super easy to get them to write for me or to get on the podcast. But dissidents, progressive dissidents, are now so in vogue It used to be a buyer's market for someone like me. No longer.
We need to talk about that. Your podcast has integrity, and it has the type of listeners that I'd like to reach, and I'd like to speak directly to them, which is what I'm doing now. So I released my letter. It took off far more than I expected it. I just thought, well, boy, everybody knows that the universities have gone mad. I just didn't think it would take off in the way that it did.
Barry Weiss knows how to blow stuff up. I mean,
Barry's good. So who reaches out to me? Tucker Carlson reaches out to me, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingalls, all Fox, all conservative. I really would like to speak to left-wing media. I consider myself a liberal. I've never hid that. I've always been honest about that. I've never voted for a Republican presidential candidate in my life. But I'd like to have conversation. Nobody on the left. Is CNN talking to me? No. Is Rachel Maddow talking to me? No.
but you said it. It's catechism.
Right.
A religious movement defines people by their heresies.
Correct. So my question to you is, what does that tell you about that media ecosystem on the left when they won't have people on who may have certain ideological disagreements with them? What does that tell you?
So what it tells me is that there's a historical phenomenon by which the losing side of any culture war is always the side that's willing to pitch a bigger tent. The side that's winning the culture war, they can afford to be puritanical. And in the halls of media, in the halls of academia, in the halls of activism, high concept journalism, the classic response when you want to have a debate about, for instance, where trans rights meet women's rights, there's a completely legitimate debate to be had there in the context of sports. And the response is, how dare you seek to debate my humanity, my existence? The concept is thrown back with apocalyptic language. The kind of people who do that, yes, they're being insincere, but it's a calculated form of insincerity that is only possible when the gambit is being played by somebody who knows that in their subculture they're on the winning side.
Okay.
As soon as the valence shifts, the big tent gets cast on the other side, and the conservatives, which I don't like that either. I mean, you saw that to the Reagan era. You saw that, the moral majority, where they became puritanical, and I don't approve of that either.
The only way that we can truly figure things out is to have some kind of a corrective mechanism, to talk about things, to engage things, to have diversity of ideas. And it makes me deeply concerned when large swaths of the media will not speak to people who hold different opinions.
That's one of the reasons people are so suspicious of the media. And I mean, it's one of the reasons Quillette has thrived, because we exist in that, I can't believe I'm using this word, in that liminal space defined by classical liberalism that exists between what passes for conservatism and doctrinaire progressive wokeism. But can I ask you sort of a personal question? I've been at Quillette for 4 years now, and I've seen a lot of people who got fed up with progressive monoculture in academia, for instance, and they step out of that world and they take on a new gig, which is what you're doing. I have also seen some of those people just kind of like keep moving rightward along the spectrum until they're sort of like just as far gone on the other side of the spectrum.
Right.
Do you see that as an occupational hazard of what you're doing?
I think it's something that we need to be mindful of. Our North Star should always be what's true. And the way that we figure out what's true is the same way we figure out anything else. You have rigorous epistemologies based upon evidence and reason, and at core, the willingness to change our beliefs. What happens is we often become what we hate. I think Antifa is the paradigmatic example of that. They're street thugs and fascists.
They're the bad guys.
Yeah, just because there's a liberal censorious ideology that we're fighting, that does not mean that we necessarily change our stance on abortion or capital punishment or what have you. We are in, to use your word, it's not exactly a liminal space, but I call it a great realignment. I published a piece in the American Mind about this. There's a great realignment that's occurring. And when I grew up, I knew exactly what the word liberal meant. I knew exactly. I could name the positions. I don't think that those terms are helpful anymore. I think that the political landscape is far too complicated right now, and there are too many variables going on. And yes, I do think that there's a danger of running into the arms of the people who are also trying to smash what you're trying to smash. But as long as you maintain your intellectual integrity and you're willing to change your mind and you formulate your beliefs on the basis of reason and evidence, and as always, your North Star is truth, I think you'll be fine. But yes, I have seen it. I have seen many people lurch rightward as a result of the radical illiberalism on the left.
It's about us as faculty and staff, but you know what? It's also not about you.
So if people want to support what you're doing and continue to follow what you're doing, what's the best way they can do that?
I'm on Twitter at Peter Boghossian, Boghossin. I have a book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. I've just started a nonprofit, National Progress Alliance, and we just got a site up, and I have so many very cool projects going on. I love now. I have the freedom. I'm not under the yoke of some deranged system. I mean, even today, I if I may, I got an email from an individual who's been stalking and harassing me for years, and it had nowhere near the effect that it would normally have on me, where I would seize up, thinking to myself, the nightmare that this is going to cause me, because I know that they can no longer go to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion or call my boss or call the dean. I'm free from that. The mechanisms that people had to keep me down and keep me quiet and harass me, I am free.
You're also going to find that those trolls go away because they're bullies. And if there isn't someone they could run to with their petulance, it's no fun for them. They're going to go harass some other professor.
Right. I've always known that people have targeted me, perhaps more than others, not because I'm super effective at the criticism or what have you, but it's because they have an institution they know that they can complain to. They know that they will really be listened to, and it will be pursued relentlessly. I no longer have to worry about that. I can truly in my life be free, and I can fight this ideology and stand up to it and teach other people how to do so.
The conceptual penis was inside us all along, it turns out.
It rises again.
I have to end this right now because it's just going to go downhill. I know how busy you are, so I really appreciate you coming on. Don't forget to build the treehouse. It's nice to go from triumph to triumph, but it's also nice to take a week or two or three to de-stress.
I appreciate that reminder. Thanks, Jonathan.
If you would like to support Quillette, please consider becoming a patron. Head to our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Quillette. If you haven't already, follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Do you like what you're hearing? Perhaps you would like to read more about the issues in today's discussion. Head to Quillette.com where you will find more content.
I'm interested in your thoughts. That's why
You're
I'm
interested
Are you
in
being paid to
explaining
be here?
things?
No.
No? You
It's off my own
volunteered?
back. I've come all the way from Australia to see what's going on
For
in your
what news
universities.
publication?
No, it's just me.
Uh-huh.
I'm interested in what's going on here. I'm actually interested in your thoughts.
Kiwi Farm.
All right, so here's my...
Power to the people! Thank you.
So as we think about this plan, we should be thinking about how are we unscrewing the screws, and it will take many hands to do this, to unscrew the structure of institutional racism. We have a beginning to do this. And our hope is that we're inviting you to come along. We're going to do it. Don't get it twisted.
Don't think this is some distant memory of far, far long ago, okay?
George, so first and foremost, you're so fucking full of shit, and don't give a damn what you have to say. You have the fucking nerve to fucking dehumanize R and me have you within this whole
And mostly all the trannies too.
Yes, yeah.
This institution's really good at targeting trannies.
Yeah. And definitely. Sorry. Yeah. You got this. You got it. You got it.
You got this, boo.
I guess within just dropping the charges against Army